In Star Trek, a two-parter isn't just an excuse not to think of a second title, and sometimes not even that. It's a chance to extend a good story beyond the usual 40 or 20 minutes or so, and leave the audience hanging, to be continued or to be concluded next week. As Trek fans are currently and keenly aware, almost every iteration, including Strange New Worlds, has used this trick. Everyone loves a rule, so let's set a few. To count as a two-parter, both episodes must have aired one after the other. That discounts the likes of That Hope Is You parts 1 and 2, for example. In one fashion or another, both episodes must also have been first broadcast separately. That means no series pilots, no series finales, except one, and no feature lengths like Dark Frontier, The Way of the Warrior, or Flesh and Blood. Finally, we won't be including multi-episode arcs or setups for the next season. Now, who among us hasn't done their best rendition of Majel Barrett's computer voice to Last Time on Star Trek? And now the conclusion. Just me. Oh, okay, right. Well, we best get on with this then. In the words of another, and also not on this list, and the adventure continues. Now, a note before we continue. I want you to make sure that you check out the article linked in the description below. That was written by Jack, on which this video is based, but will the entries remain the same? Will we match or veer in wildly different directions? An Irishman and an Englishman having different opinions, that's never happened before. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here's every two-parter ranked from worst to best. Number 42, Terra Firma Part 1, Terra Firma Part 2. First on the list, Star Trek Discovery's third season two-parter is on shakier ground than its title. Terra Firma Parts 1 and 2 weren't outright bad by any means, but there are 41 double episodes that are better. Life, the Mirror Universe and Everything, and one in the form of Carl, Guardian of Forever, or it was curtains for Philippa Georgiou. At the time, Terra Firma was meant as the back door and the big gate to the ex-Emperor's own TV spin-off show. That was a rocky road to what was Star Trek's first to-streaming movie. The two-parter's most egregious error was then, no doubt, that it became 3 in what was made of Star Trek Section 31. Number 41, Birthright Part 1, Birthright Part 2. Birthright Parts 1 and 2 are fairly forgettable episodes, especially given the competition in the 6th season of Star Trek The Next Generation. At times, they're both bordering on the tedious. It's not like the Enterprise D stopped by DS9 every other Tuesday. Here, there was barely any point that it did, save to get Julian Bashir on board. Most of the two-parter, which really didn't need to be one, was spent in Data's dreams, and then in Worf's What Klingon Warriors Worry About. Over on DS9, they were filming Move Along Home at the same time. It might somehow be preferable, just watch that twice instead. Number 40, A in Arcadia Ego Part 1, A in Arcadia Ego Part 2. More Latin is not another copy and paste job. In fact, A in Arcadia Ego is a reminder that, even in paradise, death is ever present. For Star Trek Picard's Season 1 finale, the Romulan doomsday of Ganmadan failed to repeat itself. The end of the world, or galaxy, was just the end of Jean-Luc, and the ego death of a Data, however fleeting. The greatest strength of this two-parter is the otherworldly reunion between former captain and former lieutenant commander before Picard 2.0. You'd have to have turned off your emotion chip not to be moved by that, to be fair. The two-parter's greatest weakness was the self-same duplication, not in ego, but in ships in orbit. Number 39, Gambit Part 1, Gambit Part 2. Sacrificing Captain Picard as merely another pawn in the illicit affairs of the galaxy was a bold move. Naturally, he was never dead in the first place. The rest of the two-parter wasn't quite as sound, though it was still a lot of fun. The bad guy was as weak as his method of coercion. The bad girl, played by none other than Robin Curtis, was far more entertaining than the Stone of Gaul that she sought. This device, a psionic resonator from ancient Vulcan, before the Time of Awakening, was also as odd as Gambit's freeze-frame cliffhanger, the poor man's The Best of Both Worlds. This was the final season of Star Trek The Next Generation. Its 4th and 5th episodes could and should have been a lot better. Then again, they could have been masks. Number 38, the Vulcan Hello Battle at the Binary Stars. Yes, we know. We said we weren't doing pilot episodes. However, in this case, like Michael Burnham, we're just gonna have to break the rules. Get ready to have your nerves pinch. The streaming era did things differently from the outset. No main ship, no more Captain Georgiou, and for one, no more Starfleet career for a bit. The Vulcan Hello and Battle at the Binary Stars weren't the typical treatise for a new series, but in many respects, more like a classic two-parter with a relatively self-contained plot and a cliffhanger. There was no to be continued, but then we're still feeling a bit mutinous. All things considered, this was a solid start for Star Trek Discovery. A visual feast combined with a captivating intrigue. Sadly, we just still haven't recovered from the shock of those Klingons. Number 37, Stormfront Part 1, Stormfront Part 2. As a time traveller, Daniels sure did pick his moments. Just when the crew of the NX-01 thought they were safe after a season-long survival epic, they found themselves flung into another existential crisis for all of time in an alternate 1944. If you thought the Sphere Builders were bad, wait until you meet the holy mother of Nakul. Stormfront and Stormfront Part 2 is a thrilling two-parter that would rank higher on this list, but for its own untimely placement at the start of Star Trek Enterprise's 4th season and its rush to wrap up the temporal Cold War. Like the crew, we, the audience, needed to breathe a little after the Xindi arc. Number 36, Unimatrix Zero Part 1, Unimatrix Zero Part 2. Over the years, Unimatrix Zero has taken more fire than the tactical cube within it. Is it really that bad? No. Is it great? No. Its cliffhanger is also far better than it gets credit, I will say that. Done and overdone with the Borg, perhaps, but Janeway, Tuvok and B'Elanna all assimilated? Come on! That's still pretty shocking. Of course, the real cliffhanger was that unrealized rendezvous with Harry. Unimatrix Zero's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. The very idea of a resistance movement within the Borg collective unconscious was a really good one. The execution was lackluster. The romantic relationship at its core failed to convince, vanished to the back ends of the Beta Quadrant. Mr. Axum is never spoken of again. Number 35, First Contact, Grounded. The first of the animated entries on this list was the first use of to be continued since the Star Trek Enterprise episode Demons. More on that in this list. It was also the first time, we assume, that Captain Freeman had been arrested and accidentally perp-walked in front of her crew, providing for quite the jaw-dropping cliffhanger to the second season of Star Trek Lower Decks. First Contact ended on an emotional beat. Grounded picked up to pure comedy chaos as various screens and potted plants were turned off Beckett Mariner style, all with a view of the impractical Golden Gate Bridge. The episode then did the smorgasbord of Earth hotspots and self-references, from Ketracel White Hot Gumbo to Cisco's Creole Kitchen to churros in Bozeman and raisins in Modesto. Number 34, Such Sweet Sorrow Part 1, Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2. Star Trek Discovery's second season impressed enough that fans demanded a spin-off by way of petition. Before Pike, Spock and Una could get their own, the Discovery had to be sent off to the 32nd century and never spoken of again in the 23rd onwards, under the penalty of treason. If it's a space battle you desire, and why wouldn't you? A space battle you shall get. The battle near Zahia in Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2 still ranks as one of the best put to Trek, barely skipping a dramatic beat. The midpoint arrival of Poe, the Klingons, and Sister Serana was the touch that sealed the deal. All in all, Such Sweet Sorrow is a visually stunning two-parter, which would have placed higher on this list, but for a few liberties and liabilities with the plot. The unfortunate fact is that Discovery's spore drive was more science fantasy than science fiction, and a canonical contortion in the first place. Its use did eventually grow on us, not unlike one of its mushrooms. Its non-use for over 900 years was always a fudge though. Number 33, The Inner Fight, Old Friends, New Planets. How spoiled do you have to be to demand more from a world in which everything is already free? The answer to that question is measured in Nick Locarno's. Dead ringer or not, Locarno was no Tom Paris, barely even a Lieutenant Marseille. He proved that much in the two-part Season 4 finale of Star Trek Lower Decks. In fact, only Lower Decks could bring back an obscure but ultimately memorable character as the big bad of the season at the end of an episode that owes its pun to another. The Locarno cliffhanger will hold up as one of the most shocking of all time. Old Friends, New Planets was just as strong. Nova Squadron got a self-promotion to Nova Fleet, and we got to see more through flashbacks of the events surrounding the first duty. Boimler in command knocked it out of the park and smashed it into the shield grid. And let there be Latinum, or its Genesis for you. Number 32, A Moral Star Part 1, A Moral Star Part 2. At the start of Star Trek Prodigy's first season, the kids had risked it all to escape their prison on Tars Lamora. Now, in the mid-season two-parter, they dared to return with a plan to save the rest of the Unwanted from the dastardly Diviner and his dreadnought. A Moral Star Parts 1 and 2 do, in about 40 minutes, what other two-part episodes have failed to do in twice that time. The premise is established with astounding proficiency, leaving way for the action delicately intertwined with moments of genuine pathos and laugh-out-loud comedy. A Moral Star Part 2 ended on a dramatic cliffhanger, a future doomsday of Starfleet, and saw the return of Vice Admiral Janeway, last seen in Star Trek Nemesis. The end of A Moral Star Part 2 also marked a particularly long pause for answers between Parts 1 and 2 of the season itself, from the beginning of February 2022 to nearly the end of October that same year. Number 31, Workforce Part 1, Workforce Part 2. First day on the new job? Try not to trigger a core overload. This whole place runs on Tilium, but there are no Cylon second chances. Workplace alienation and the ill treatment of the immigrant labour force is the theme, one that's sadly hitting home more today than it did when the two-parter was first broadcast. In that workforce is a fine piece of science fiction, even if it doesn't quite reach the dizzying heights of the other Star Trek Voyager two-parters. Allegories and memory manipulations aside, Workforce and Workforce Part 2 were the chance for a what-if for the crew of Voyager. So close to the series finale, what if they ended up settling in the Delta Quadrant, the what-if of the Emergency Command hologram, ECH, also went from daydreams to reality for the Doctor. In actuality, Captain Janeway was no fool for the falsely implanted premises of another life. Not for a second. Number 30, Into the Breach Part 1, Into the Breach Part 2. Disguise fair nature with hard-favoured rage, declared Shakespeare's Henry V in Once More Unto the Breach speech. In less elegant terms, we were all bloody pissed off in June 2023 when we heard the news that Star Trek Prodigy had been cancelled mid-post-production of Season 2. Its opener, Into the Breach, is the two-parter of several that was nearly never seen, but for the warlike Michelle Stokes herself on her plane. With the move to Netflix, and also France.tv, Prodigy's second season became the first in Star Trek history to be released all at once. Nothing is a two-parter longer than it takes to hit next episode or to wait for the autoplay, but moving the goalposts doesn't mean we have to switch to a different game. Into the Breach Parts 1 and 2 thoroughly deserve their place on this list. They saw the return of the Doctor introduced to us in the glorious Voyager A, and best of all, they began on the always marvellous Murph. Number 29, Basics Part 1, Basics Part 2. There's nothing basic about Basics, the first of several two-parters in Star Trek Voyager's run home. For a moment it looked like the crew would be living out, or dying out, the rest of their days on planet Pliocene, forever sprinting away from the locals. Of course, the cliffhanger was never, are they going to make it, but how are they going to make it? Back to the ship. Tom Paris, the Talaxians, a hologram, and a repentant murderer, that's how. That was one hell of a plan to have come up with in 1 hour, Tommy boy. Stripped down to the essentials, the plot is not dissimilar to that of Workforce and Workforce Part 2, a rescue from an alien world. If the Basics two-parter places higher on this list, then it's because so early on the stakes were extra cataclysmic, and at the time you had to wait the summer to see if Voyager would fly back through the atmosphere. Number 28, The Maquis Part 1, The Maquis Part 2. The Mackey two-parter is far from perfect. Its first half drags somewhat towards a cliffhanger that could arguably be seen coming a few light years away. Moreover, since we, the audience, had only just met Commander Calvin Hudson, it was difficult to be all that invested in his change of allegiance. The Mackey, parts 1 and 2, ultimately stand out for their importance to Star Trek lore. Prefigured in the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Journey's End, this was the formal introduction of the titular rebels, named after those groups of the French and Belgian resistance during the Second World War. The movement would continue to make its presence felt on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, The Next Generation, and Voyager. The Badlands also got their first mention in the Maquis Part 1. As Sisko pointed out, a few ships have been lost there over the past year or two. Number 27, Affliction, Divergence. Trying to find satisfying in-universe explanations for out-of-universe issues is like trying to find the haystack in the needle. We're imagining the problem the wrong way around. Those sudden forehead ridges probably did need some sort of internally consistent clarification. Affliction and Divergence gave us one. If we didn't like the answer, we probably should have asked better questions. This fourth season Star Trek Enterprise two-parter provided one of the most gripping cliffhangers and resolutions of the franchise. No bomb on the bus, a subroutine of the warp matrix instead. Sabotaged by Klingon augments, the NX-01 couldn't go below warp 5 or the reactor would breach. Luckily, the NX-02 was nearby. Now they just have to zipwire Mr. Tucker across to perform one of the biggest "have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again" jobs in history. Oh, and Malcolm's been a very naughty boy. Number 26, Demons, Terra Prime. Demons and Terra Prime often pull double duty for many fans as a strong two-parter in their own right, and as the Star Trek Enterprise unofficial series finale. Both episodes represent what was best about Enterprise. As a series, it had a tough task of being the OG prequel, but set far enough back so as not to risk overlapping with familiar faces. Seeing humanity's first forays into deep space and the interstellar community on the road to the Federation was always a tantalizing prospect. The temporal Cold War and time travel more widely meant that Enterprise was never truly isolated from the future of the franchise. It was the resurgent xenophobia in the wake of the temporally influenced Xindi attacks that emboldened the likes of Paxton in Demons and Terra Prime. Number 25, Descent Part 1, Descent Part 2. Borg behind the door, we've played Data lore before. Where does Jack come up with these? Descent is a thoroughly decent two-parter, even if Legacy has made its reveal part of a tad bit of franchise repetition. The first half, the first scene, will of course be forever iconic for the best of cameos, that of the late Professor Stephen Hawking. With no disrespect to Brent Spiner's always excellent double act, Descent's most intriguing aspect, developed in the second half, was the continuation of Hugh's story after I, Borg. Individuality was more of a sickness for the collective than any invasive computer program could be. In Descent Part 2, Dr. Crusher also got to show off her aptitude for command, and not without a little in-joke about metaphasic shields. Number 24, The Killing Game Part 1, The Killing Game Part 2. Perhaps all the world is a holodeck under the thumb of the Herodian, in which we're just fighting for our lives. Somewhat reduced in scale, that was the deadly dilemma faced by those Voyager crew members not locked in their quarters or working on the bridge in The Killing Game. The Hunters have caught up. We don't see the battle, but we know who won. The resistance now plays out on Holodeck 1 as much as it does on the rest of the ship. Catherine is Katrine, leader of, in essence, a Maquis cell. Chakotay is the American liberator of St. Clair. The cliffhanger was certainly dramatic, a massive explosion and half of Voyager, now one unending set of simulations. In the US, The Killing Game and The Killing Game Part 2 were also originally aired on the same night, a first for a Star Trek two-parter, not including feature lengths. In fact, The Killing Game was promoted as a feature-length single episode, but for reasons unknown even to the Star Trek Voyager producers, shown as two separate episodes. Number 23, Future's End Part 1, Future's End Part 2. A leads to B leads to one damn good two-parter. Time travel's not just for headaches after all. Future's End and Future's End Part 2 gave us many things: Freakosaurus, Blaine's twin brother, and the Doctor's mobile emitter. Both episodes also provided the perfect opportunity to see the crew of Voyager home before they were home. Right place, wrong time. As for the nefarious billionaire, well, times never change. As a two-parter, Future's End is an extended attempt at social commentary on the disparity between the haves and have-nots, but remains eminently aware of its own farcical premise throughout. It works by blending the lighter-hearted with the more dramatic and, at times, the overtly pedagogic. Its villain, Henry Starling, might be mustache-twirlingly one-note, but then what use is character development when a photon torpedo will do? Number 22, Times Arrow Part 1, Times Arrow Part 2. At times camper than Christmas in the Nexus, the Times Arrow two-parter is never winning awards for subtlety of any sort. That's largely its charm. I dare say it has been parodied to perfection too. Get your best cosplay on, sometimes the twain shall meet. The premise is relatively simple. Some rando in a silver jumpsuit finds Data's head buried in a cavern beneath San Francisco and shows it to Data, who still has a head, and Captain Picard. Standard. In practice, these things were a little bit more complicated than that. To dismantle and rebuild Data, Times Arrow and Times Arrow Part 2 took a mind-boggling bend to the 19th century and back via Guinan, Samuel Clemens, and the neural energy-sucking Davidians. This was just pure sci-fi fun. Number 21, Past Tense Part 1, Past Tense Part 2. The past of Past Tense has caught up with us. The Bell Riots were last year. Star Trek Deep Space Nine's third season two-parter was as much a bold allegory of homelessness in the mid-90s America as it was a projection towards the future should things continue along the same path. That Past Tense Parts 1 and 2 don't feature higher on this list is because they are at times a little ham-fisted in their social commentary, most notably in the dialogue between the more historically savvy Sisko and the less well-appraised Bashir. Often he states what we are meant to feel. It was also always a bit of a cheat to return to great man and big events theory as the true impetus for social and historical change. In reality, only the tireless work at a grassroots level, not a singular occurrence stamped in time, will make the 21st century a safer place for all to live in across the globe. To think otherwise is to let oneself off the hook. Number 20, The Search Part 1, The Search Part 2. In theory, The Search is a 3, not 2-parter, because in practice, the Jem'Hadar don't like campers. In reality though, Star Trek Deep Space Nine's second season finale was relatively self-contained. Its conclusion did come with an ominous warning, the response to which was decloaked in the opener of The Search Part 1. If you go looking for trouble, you'll probably find it in the Omarian Nebula. Though, to put it in playground terms, the Dominion and its founders, well, they started it. The big reveal, Odo's people and the overlords of the Gamma Quadrant were one and the same. You had to wait until practically the end of Part 2 to find that out. Until then, welcome home. Please enjoy our complimentary tour of the Arboretum. Number 19, Shockwave Part 1, Shockwave Part 2. Seasons 1 and 2 of Star Trek Enterprise are far better than their reputation would suggest. We only have to look at the episodes that straddle them to see that. It all started with a massive explosion, followed by incomprehension and time travel. Shockwave and Shockwave Part 2 were high-end sci-fi, with a vertiginous cliffhanger and a clever resolution. Before Kovich was Kovich, he was Daniels, plucking Captain Archer every which way out of the timeline. At first, in Shockwave, that merely meant more room for a chat semi-clothed about quantum beacons and data disks. Second, it caused the end of everything on Earth in, and at some point before, the 31st century. It was a long way down what was left of that skyscraper. In Part 2, we also learned that, in the regular 31st century, they taught teenagers how to communicate through time. Prank calls must have been something else. Thankfully, this particular one saved the past and its future. Number 18, Ascension Part 1, Ascension Part 2. Truth be told, Ascension Parts 1 and 2 were contenders for higher up on this list, but with so many outstanding outings from Star Trek Prodigy, choices had to be made. Like the rest of the Season 2, neither episode leaves much more than nitpicking to reproach it with. Both deftly mixed action, emotion, temporal physics, and high villainy. They even got a Morn joke in there too. Ascensia was on the rise and taking no prisoners, except one. The Rev 1 was a warship, packed with temporal technology, but ultimately no match for the combined forces of Voyager, the Protostar, and the new Nova Squadron, done the right way, Boothby supernova in the sky. In all of that, Zero's gut-wrenching self-sacrifice to stop the Incursor weapon couldn't fail to reduce us to tears. Number 17, In a Mirror Darkly Part 1, In a Mirror Darkly Part 2. Before all else, In a Mirror Darkly deserves credit for daring to do. No other Star Trek had set an episode, let alone two, entirely from the perspective of another universe. Even the title credits were terrifyingly Terran. The opener was First Contact with a shotgun. In showrunner Manny Koto's words on the DVD extra Inside the Mirror episodes, this was a pure romp. Like all episodes in the Mirror universe, the In a Mirror Darkly two-parter is hammier than non-replicated ham. More than anything, that's a compliment. It takes a great deal of subtlety to be so successfully extravagant. The inclusion of the USS Defiant as a focal plot point was a stroke of genius, requiring the elaborate reconstruction of numerous Constitution-class sets, the most at that point since the original series. Number 16, Supernova Part 1, Supernova Part 2. It's more than fitting that the two-part finale of Star Trek Prodigy's first season should be named after supernovae. From the beginning, the show managed a dazzling feat, creating the new, the fresh, the exciting out of and alongside the utmost respect for the old. It also had a protostar at its core. In terms of pure explosions, Supernova Parts 1 and 2 were not lacking either. Seen briefly at the end of Mindwalk, a whole armada of Starfleet ships, including the Defiant, the Thunderchild, the Centaur, and the Sovereign, took an infernal beating to the whim of the Vau-N'Akat construct. Speaking of beatings, shout out to one kick-arse, raspberry-blowing, butt-slapping Murph. We also commend the show's promotion of language learning as a means of bringing people together. As the extraordinary polyglot Gwyn herself put it, because in the infinite of space, everyone needs to know there is a place out there willing to accept us all, no matter how different we think we are. And if that's not Star Trek in one sentence, nothing else is. Number 15, Ouroboros Part 1, Ouroboros Part 2. If there is to be no more Star Trek Prodigy, then at least, like the snake and its own tail, it ended as it meant to go on. There have been few better series finales. Ouroboros Parts 1 and 2 were the conclusion to the near-perfect second season, both an ingenious return full circle to the very beginning of Season 1, and a new, hopeful course for the future set aboard the USS Prodigy. We sincerely hope to see ship and crew again. After wrestling with Essensia's forces and wrapping up the loom, Wesley returned to see his mum and brother, Admiral Janeway took her much-deserved retirement, and the kids returned to the Academy. Ouroboros Part 2 had one last twist in the tail, however, the synth attack on Mars and its fallout. Never underestimate a so-called kids show. Number 14, Chain of Command Part 1, Chain of Command Part 2. Instead of the lights, just show him the memes. There are definitely more than 4 of those. The enduring power of the Chain of Command two-parter lies in its endless repeatability, largely removed from the message, but all in good fun, especially for the internet. Loathe him or loathe him just a little bit less, Chain of Command also gave us the equally iconic Captain, now Admiral, Jellicoe. Put 2 of the finest Shakespearean actors, preferably well lit, alone in a room together, and you're going to get some acting. Patrick Stewart gave a harrowing performance. As the victim of physical and psychological torture, both he and writer Frank Abate-Marco had consulted with Amnesty International on the scenes. For Chain of Command, David Warner was whisked in to play opposite his old friend with only 3 days warning before filming began. He didn't even have time to learn his lines for Golden Thread. Though you would never know it, he read mostly from cue cards instead. Number 13, In Purgatory's Shadow by Inferno's Light. Dr. Bashir wasn't in prison for an infraction of the Starfleet Uniform Code, but he was still operating under previous dress regulations when he popped up in Jem'Hadar Jail in Purgatory's Shadow. And that wasn't even the cliffhanger. No need for sandwiches, there is so much plot and character development in Purgatory's Shadow and by Inferno's Light, you'll be satiated for weeks. Full-scale war would have to wait until Call to Arms. For the moment, Cardassia had joined the Dominion, and Dukat was now head of the Cardassian government. Because of course he was. We learnt that Enabrin Tain was Garrick's father, the Breen don't have blood, and that you should only go to warp inside a solar system if that solar system is about to be reduced to cinders. Number 12, Homefront, Paradise Lost. Star Trek Deep Space Nine made a point to point out that, even in the ideal of the 24th century, humanity was not exempt from falling back on the foibles of paranoia, suspicion, and fear when the going suddenly got tough. Homefront and Paradise Lost are prime examples of that message, not the destruction of Jean's vision, but the vigilance needed to see it through. Both episodes are a permanent reminder that, in times of crisis and doubt, we must not sacrifice our personal liberties to the excesses of state security and surveillance. It is all too easy to fall into the trap laid out for us, to start seeing the enemy everywhere, even in those nearest and dearest. The founders didn't need to invade Earth, they just needed to make it look like they had. Thankfully, the likes of Joseph Sisko knew how to be stubborn when stubborn was exactly what was needed. Number 11. Fisher Quest, the new next generation. T'Pol, Garashir, Curzon Dax, Harry Kim, or rather Harry's Kim, all under the command of William Boimler on a Defiant-class ship. What more could you ask for? Oh yeah, only Lily Flippin' Sloan. The first half of the series finale of Star Trek Lower Decks, and yes, we are counting it, was more than mere cameos and guest stars for the sake of it. Fisher Quest was a bona fide brilliant story, traversing the multiverse in search of the bad guys who turned out to be the good guys who hadn't quite thought things through. Its cliffhanger was as hilarious as we'd come to expect, and more than a touch climactic. Holy fuck, we're all gonna die! As a follow-up and conclusion to 5 seasons, the new Next Generation was extremely satisfying. The gate at Starbase 80, or Starbase 80 at the gate, was in itself the possible setup for what could be an intriguing spin-off series across the multiverse. We're still hoping for more from Lower Decks in some form, now with a new captain and 2 provisional first officers. Number 10. The Menagerie Part 1, The Menagerie Part 2. Star Trek's very first 2-parter could have just been Star Trek's very first clip show, of a pilot nobody had seen at the time. Instead, its framing device was largely clever enough to be captivating from the get-go, even if you have seen the cage in the intro. As the Menagerie Part 1 begins, the Enterprise has been called to Starbase 11, only to find that the messenger could never have sent the message. The teaser ends with a shock revelation. Spock is about to commit treason and mutiny, and it all has something to do with his former captain, Christopher Pike. Spock's plan is partly interrupted by his court-martial, or so it would seem. The Menagerie's solution to its fourth wall break is that it was all a Talosian transmission. Lock him up, and the death penalty was then Star Trek's original cliffhanger, to be concluded next week. Fortunately, the court-martial itself was all an illusion too, affording Captain Pike the same measure of salvation. Number 9. The Devourer of All Things Part 1, The Devourer of All Things Part 2. Star Trek likes its Latin titles, in this case far more effective, far more comprehensible in translation, from Ovid's Metamorphoses, Tempus Edax Rerum, or Time Devourer of All Things. The Star Trek Prodigy's second season 2-parter, The Devourer of All Things, reversed the notion, introducing us to a new species that feasted on time itself. The Loom, a terrifyingly tentacled transdimensional foe, fed on their victims until they were erased from it. We big kids were scared in equal measure. The Devourer of All Things Part 1 also marked the triumphant, greater-than-a-cameo return of a former acting ensign cadet dress uniform at a wedding. I'm Wesley Crusher, and I've been waiting for you. We'd been waiting for you too, Mr. Crusher, though hardly expecting you. This had been kept more of a secret than the Omega molecule. Number 8. Equinox Part 1, Equinox Part 2. Equinox, or Equal Night, is more than just the name of the Nova class, lending itself to the title of the 2-parter. As Starfleet officers, and as Starfleet officers in similarly stranded situations, the abhorrent actions of Rudy Ransom and crew cast a long shadow over Voyager too. There also, but for the grace of a bigger ship, go we. As a set of episodes, Equinox and Equinox Part 2 benefit from an absorbing, well-executed premise, backed by Jay Chataway's heart-pounding score, and accompanied by an acting masterclass on the part of Kate Mulgrew and John Savage. Janeway's dressing down of Ransom and his subsequent attempt at a defense was nothing short of exquisite to watch. And whatever you thought of her methods, Janeway's determination to pursue the Equinox crew for their crimes was played to pitch perfection. Number 7. Improbable Cause, The Die is Cast. "You blew up your own shop, Garrick!" But of course he did. The truth is usually just an excuse for a lack of explosives. Improbable Cause and The Die Is Cast gave us a few more answers to the mystery that was Garrick. The rest was the same lie twice, and a horrendous time for Odo. Factually, this was the first two-parter in Star Trek to have two separate names, although The Homecoming and The Circle both ended on To Be Continued and concluded in The Siege. Also, a matter of record, Improbable Cause and The Die Is Cast began life as a standalone episode that eventually evolved to become two. That late-stage decision meant that both episodes were shot out of sequence. Through the Looking Glass was filmed before The Die Is Cast. An isolinear rod a day won't keep the Obsidian Order away. Number 6, Unification 1, Unification 2. As detailed in the Star Trek The Next Generation companion, Unification 1 and 2 began life as an idea from then Paramount president Frank Mancuso. As well as including references to the future in Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country, Mancuso wanted to find a way to bring Spock into The Next Generation for Star Trek's 25th anniversary. Rick Berman met with Leonard Nimoy to discuss the story. The result was iconic, so much so that 2 is now technically a three-parter, thanks to Star Trek Discovery's third season, the titular dream having been achieved on the renamed Ni'Var. Then, if not the fourth part, the finest of the addenda, Otoy and the Roddenberry Archives 765874 Unification most recently reunited Spock with his former captain and friend at the very end. Number 5, Scorpion Part 1, Scorpion Part 2. The length of Scorpion's cold open is inversely proportional to the punch it packs. In only a few seconds, several Borg cubes go from standard self-assurance to blown to smithereens. What could be more powerful than the galaxy's most devastating assimilators? 4 numbers, that's who. You know the ones, and the 8472s. Of course, beyond interdimensional warfare with Voyager in the middle up of the Northway Passage, the Scorpion two-parter also gave us one of Star Trek's most beloved, most enduring characters. 7 of 9, now captain of the Enterprise G. For that reason alone, Scorpion deserves its high place on this list. Captain Janeway's appeal to the devil might not have been popular, but it paid off. Number 4, Redemption Part 1, Redemption Part 2. Sela steps out of the shadows, Data sticks it to Lieutenant Commander Hobson on the Sutherland. Enough said, really. Next entry? Nah, there's more to Redemption Part 2 than that. A Klingon civil war funneled and funded by the Romulans, and one half-Romulan in particular. Klingon infighting! I know, shocking, right? But it's not to everyone's taste. And even those with blood pie optional palates must recognise that Redemption and Redemption Part 2 are objectively excellent episodes. As well as letting us see parallel Natasha Yar's daughter, Redemption also introduced us to the famously boob-windowed Duras sisters. They were good fun too, until they forgot to replace those plasma coils. Number 3, Last Flight of the Protostar Part 1, Last Flight of the Protostar Part 2. Simply put, this two-parter is sublime. With the recent news that seasons 1 and 2 of Star Trek Prodigy will soon be leaving Netflix, their place on this list could not be more timely. Visually stunning, highly innovative, heartwarming and heartbreaking, Last Flight of the Protostar is masterful at every move. Chakotay, the captain who had lost his crew, gets his chance to shine, stranded on Isida for 10 years. Launching a starship out onto an ocean of vapor was then one of the boldest, most beautiful things to be put to Star Trek. Whatever the future holds for Prodigy, it has already left an indelible mark on the franchise. It has reminded us that grown up is not necessarily synonymous with growth, and that being an adult doesn't mean you have to pretend you're no longer a child. Anyone who tells you they've got their shit together is either lying or a loon. All any of us can truly do is set sail and then hope to fly. Number 2, The Best of Both Worlds Part 1, The Best of Both Worlds Part 2. I know, the sounds of screens clicking off is as loud as the sound of the voice of the Borg Collective itself. The Best of Both Worlds isn't number 1, no! But hold your fire. For as good as it is, after 35 years, we feel it's time that something else takes the top spot. Besides, as someone else who went to space once said, second comes right after first. The Best of Both Worlds was only the second two-parter in all of Star Trek. Now, Encounter at Farpoint was a feature-length episode. It changed the game, upped the ante, and firmly solidified Star Trek The Next Generation's place as worthy successor after an already much stronger Season 3. It will forever be one of the finest pieces of television ever made. Now, wait a summer to see if they killed Captain Picard or not. Number 1, Year of Hell Part 1, Year of Hell Part 2. With Voyager's 4th season, the writers truly struck gold. We've already highlighted the strengths of Scorpion here, but when one wants an outstanding time, one only needs to grab a tank top and a haircut. There is only one negative for Year of Hell, perhaps two, depending on your opinion of temporal do-overs. This two-parter had partly been spoiled in advance in Before and After, that spoiler then conveniently forgotten about post-Kess. Otherwise, it is as calculably perfect as anything calculable can be. It's strange thinking there's a piece of your life you don't know anything about, Captain Janeway would say much later to Chakotay in Shattered. That strange irony exists with the viewer. We have access to information, to events that characters do not. The beauty of Year of Hell and Year of Hell Part 2 is the high-stakes testing ground without the repercussions. Time's up. Time begins again. We still know exactly how hard Janeway and crew fought for that fresh start. Though Voyager was not a series prone to serialized storytelling, when it connected its episodes together, it more often than not struck gold. Year of Hell is an acting masterclass from Kate Mulgrew, boasts a superior guest star in the form of the returning Kurtwood Smith, and the infinitely quotable "Time's Up" has been imitated again and again. There may have been a reset button, but this two-parter reminded us all why we wanted that ship, that crew to be saved. Somewhere, in some form, we will see each other again. And that's everything for our list today, folks. Thank you so much for watching along. I know this is a bit longer than usual. Thank you so much to Jack, who wrote the article this is based on. Now, please do go and check that out over on whatculture.com because some things may have changed. You are awesome. You are wonderful. Please don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really makes such a difference when you do. I promise I'm not just saying that, it really does make a difference. Please make sure you're following us on the various socials. We're at TrekCulture. I am at Sean Ferrick. Until I see you again, live long and prosper. Look after yourself. The world is a scary place at the moment. Try and lead with kindness. If we just look after each other and look after ourselves in the short term, that will grow and that will help people. So if that's one thing you can do today is just help yourself and help others, that will make the world of difference. Folks, thank you so much. I will see you very soon, please God. You are wonderful. Thanks a million.